Welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast. We bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders and influencers who are making headway and definitely some waves in their callings and industries. And today we're joined by a man who's on a mission to empower other men to reclaim their strength in body, mind, and spirit. Sean McManus is the founder of McManus Strength and Nutrition, and he is here to share his journey from corporate burnout to purposeful entrepreneurship. Sean's story is one of faith, courage, and transformation. After years in the corporate world feeling unfulfilled and disconnected from his true calling, Sean took a leap of faith. He left behind the security of his job to build a life of impact and purpose, driven by his passion for helping others and creating a better life for his family. So, get ready in this episode for an inspiring conversation as we delve into topics ranging from faith, fitness, family, leadership, and mental toughness. Sean will share practical strategies. He'll give us some wisdom and personal insights to help each of us step into our max potential with boldness and strength. Now, before we roll that intro, please share this with your friends and networks today. I know many are going to enjoy this conversation, not to mention need it. Two other things you can do, if you could be so kind, is to give 5am Podcast a 5-star review on your favorite podcast player. And we would like to thank those who ventured over to buymeacoffee.com/5am Podcast and bought us a few cups of coffee this week and last. We do appreciate your support. And if you want to join those early risers who've bought in to support the mission of 5am Podcast, we welcome you to join us in our mission as we help others seize their days. Now, let's roll that intro. Sean McManus, welcome to the 5am Podcast.
Michael, thank you, brother. It's great to be here.
Yes, I'm excited for our conversation. And I know when you popped up on Podmatch, I was like, this is the guy. I got to have him on. So it's great to make your virtual acquaintance and to sit down across the interwebs and chat with each other about life and excelling and maybe some mindset renewal and getting rid of some stinking thinking that just kind of creeps in. And so on that note of stinking thinking creeping in, it's we've heard the lines, we are what we eat, as a man thinks in his heart mind, so is he. There's the Chinese proverb I'd like to bring up, men are like teacups, when they're bumped, what's inside comes out. So in your corporate job, what was the circumstances that really caused you to stop, put the brakes on, and say, I need to make a change?
Oh, man. There was several. I'll start with the tipping point. The
Yeah.
tipping point was we were getting ready to have our second child, and we're a single income household. And with the economy the way that it was, we were already not getting by very well. And so with baby number 2 on the way, it's like, okay, something has to change. I'm now on a time clock to find something to better support my family. So that was the tipping point. And in that job, there wasn't really any opportunity for me to move forward or for me to get a raise. And so I was there, Michael, for about 8 years. And probably after 2 years of being there, I was ready for more of a challenge. So it was very mundane for me. I like problem solving. I like trying new things. I like challenging myself. I like to lead others, and I really wasn't getting that from that job. And there just wasn't any room for improvement. It was like, okay, this is good if I'm content with just staying in one spot for the rest of my life. And I was absolutely not content with that. So that was kind of the main circumstances that were like, okay, I need to move on to something else. And I knew I needed to move on to something else, but I think us having our second child, that was kind of God's way of like kicking me out the door. It's like, okay, it's time to move.
Well, that's good. That's good. So why health and fitness? Why helping other men specifically with mindset and physicality?
Yeah, so health and fitness is something that I've been pursuing for over a decade now. And it's always been something that's been an important part of my life. So in that decade of training and research and working with other men that are better than me, coaches, all the things like that, you learn a lot. So throughout my journey, I had been able to help some other men, some guys that I had met said, hey, you look pretty good. You're strong. How do I get like that? It's like, okay. So I had started helping some guys with that virtually because, I have several friends that are in different states and kind of scattered across
Gotcha.
the United States.
Yeah.
Um, and we've met virtually, just like you and I are speaking now.
Hmm.
And so I started helping guys, was really enjoying it. And so I was like, okay, well, I want to help other men. I want to train other men. And this is an area that I feel like is really an expertise for me. And the other piece to that, when I was kind of praying through, like, God, what are my next steps? What do you have for me? What am I supposed to do in this season? Because I know I'm supposed to be moving forward. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not really happy with where I am. So, what is it? I know that you have something. I don't know what it is. And through that prayer and, just really seeking him and trying to figure out what his will was for me I heard very distinctly from him. And I'm not the kind of guy that says, I hear from God all the time, but it
Right.
was very clear. It was like, I need you to help my men get stronger. I was like,
Hmm.
okay. So that's where we started.
That's a great commission. Now, as you're talking with these gentlemen, or people find you and they make their way to you, and on that line, how do people actually get in touch with you?
Yeah. So everything right now is through social media. So I'm across the majority of the platforms. My two most active ones are Facebook and X. Facebook is Sean McManus. You can send me a DM there. X and Instagram are the Sean McManus, and you can send me a DM there as well.
Right. That's good. I usually ask that question like 75% of the way through the conversation, but today I thought, hey, maybe someone's going to want to do a little web surfing over to your platforms while
Absolutely.
we're talking. So, when men do talk to you, what are some of their tipping points that maybe cause them, that's it, I've had it, I've got to give Sean a call?
Yeah. So a big one is energy. A
Mm,
lot of guys, they've gotten out of shape. They're not eating well. A lot of them are overweight, and a lot of the guys that I work with have young kids.
yeah,
So, they get home and their kids want to play as kids do, and they just don't
yeah,
have the energy.
yeah,
They literally can't do anything, and they come to me. They're like, "Hey, this is not okay." And obviously, I agree wholeheartedly with that
yes,
because our children are only young for so long, and they need to be able to have dad to run around and play with.
right, absolutely. Yeah. And I think for men, one of the things, there's a lot of different opinions of the sacrifice that men actually have to make. And so one of them is oftentimes being the main source of income, the breadwinner, as it were. But you know what? There's another sacrifice that men have to make, and it is our physical health. Because it's kind of like if you're, God forbid, you're on a plane that's having some mechanical problems and the air masks fall out. The number one thing is put it on yourself so that you're actually in a position to help those around you. Not only, yeah, it's just interesting to look at a family dynamic in terms of sacrifice. And men sacrifice birthdays, they sacrifice certain other events because they have to go out and work, they have to go hunt and gather. Can you talk a little bit about the necessity of men understanding we're built to sacrifice?
Yeah. So that is, in scripture, God talks about we are the head of our wives. And a lot of the times that gets interpreted as we are the head of our households. And there's truth to that. In that leadership position requires sacrifice. So, we think about it in the dynamic of the workplace. Who's the one that has to stay late? Who's the one that has to take responsibility when things don't go well? It's the boss man, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So when we look at that from a family dynamic, as men, we're called to be the leaders of our families and the leaders of our homes. So, in that sense, that automatically means that we are the ones that have to sacrifice during that time. And I kind of want to hit on what you talked about just a minute ago, Michael, about the oxygen masks. I'm glad that you brought
yeah,
that up
yeah.
because that's another thing that I discuss with guys a lot. In this, feeling of sacrifice, guys oftentimes lose themselves. Men oftentimes lose themselves, and I've been there. It's
Mhm.
a terrible feeling, and you just feel like your life consists of nothing but sacrifice, and you're trying to pour out to these people around you. You're trying
Mhm.
to pour out to your wife. You're trying to pour out to your kids, your friends, whatever, whoever's in your group of influence, and you're trying to pour from an empty cup, and that just
Yeah,
doesn't work well. So, in the same way that you have to put your oxygen mask on before you can help other people, in the way of health and fitness, you have to fill up your cup in order to actually serve those around you well.
right.
So a lot of guys see it as like, I can't do this because it's selfish.
Mm,
This is one of the most least selfish things that you can do because what it
absolutely.
does is it pours over into your family and you show up better for your wife. You show up
Yeah.
better for your kids. You show up better for your creator. You show up better for
Mhm.
your workplace.
Yeah. And when you find what you're capable of, there's a Stoic quote that I know I'm not going to get right, and I don't have time to look it up while we're talking right now, but it is this line of, "It's a shame for a man to not know the physical limits that he could have reached in the course of his life." Can you talk about some of the mental health things that come from men once they enter into some sort of endurance or strength training program?
Yes, absolutely. There's a couple of different aspects there. One of them is self-confidence. So as Christians, we often take the piece of self-confidence and we put it too far, and we end up dumping self-confidence in the same bucket as arrogance. So arrogance and self-confidence are not the same. So I want to say that first.
Yeah,
Self-confidence is being confident in the man that you are, confident in your capabilities, confident in the way that God created you. So a lot of guys are lacking that. And when you go
yeah,
and you start to train and you start to exercise, you start to push your body, you start to see what your body is capable of, and you start to build your self-confidence. The other
yeah,
piece of that is when you decide that you're going to exercise, that you're going to stick to a routine, and you actually start to implement that, and you actually start to keep the promises to yourself that you're
hmm,
making, you
yeah,
in turn start to remember that you can trust yourself again because you're doing the things that you said you would do. And
yeah.
that also builds your self-confidence.
That's right. And it's one step in front of the other, precept upon precept, line upon line, as the Holy Scriptures tell us. I'm just going to read a couple of quotes here. This first one is from Seneca, who's one of my favorite Stoic philosophers. "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." And can you maybe expound on that a little bit, of that physical labor in the gym? Like you're saying, I know we've kind of touched on it already. It's not actually selfish. It's a key thing to grow as men.
Yes, absolutely. So you had brought up, how that kind of mental toughness pours over into the rest of your life or how you build that up in the
Yeah,
gym. So
yeah,
during life, I'm sure all of our listeners can attest to this. I can attest to this. I'm sure you can, Michael. Life can be
yeah.
difficult. It is not always easy. It is not always fun, for instance. When you go in the gym, when you push your body to limits that you did not realize you could achieve,
Yeah.
when you stay there and you put in that work and you do that extra rep that you didn't think you could do, or you lift
Mm-hmm.
that amount of weight that you didn't think you could lift, that is training your mind to know that you can do hard things. So that
Mm-hmm.
transfers
Yeah.
over into your regular life. So you're building your ability to handle hard things and handle hard things well in a controlled environment, which you can then use that ability when you get into regular life and life gets
Yeah.
difficult. You've already
Yeah.
convinced yourself that you can do hard things and you can handle those hard
That's
times.
right. Yeah. I know when at my time there was a place here called Gym of the North that I absolutely loved going to. We've since moved, and so that's a fond memory. But sitting at that seated chest press and being able to hit 400 pounds, and not just once, but another time and another time and another time. And as much as I wasn't looking for accolades from those around me that saw me stick all these plates on the side, but it was for me, knowing that I had worked, I had disciplined myself. I had gotten to this spot. Same thing when I did my first deadlift of 300 pounds. That was just monumental for me in my mind. Can you talk about how our mind, it plays such a role? Sometimes we don't realize what we're capable of until we're pushed to it. And just before you answer, I got to go to Seneca again. He said, "Fire tests gold, suffering tests brave men."
Yeah, I think it just goes back to the self-confidence piece, and it goes back to the
Mhm.
piece of convincing yourself that you're capable of doing things that you don't think you can do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
something else that kind of comes to mind for me there is, we look at the Old Testament. Men, in a sense, were built for war. We were built to fight. We
Hmm.
were built to defend. And thankfully, for the most part, most of us aren't going to have to experience that in our lifetime. So there's a piece of us that's missing in that sense that we're not having to go fight. We're not having to go, stand up for what we believe in that
Hmm.
way. So going to the gym is a way of quote unquote going to war with yourself and just building that endurance and building that
Yeah.
strength and embodying that, fierce masculinity that God put inside of you.
Right. And a lot of it then comes down to that word called discipline. And of course, from a Christian perspective, Jesus didn't tell his followers to make converts. He told them to make disciples, which involves discipline. And so, of course, many men struggle with maybe laziness or video game playing or gluttony, or they can't find a hobby. How can discipline and faith work together to help men overcome these challenges?
Yeah, so I'm probably going to butcher this, but there's a verse, I believe it's Hebrews 12:11, and it talks about
Okay.
how a discipline is unpleasant at a time, but
It
it
sure
brings
is.
forth the fruit of righteousness.
Hmm.
So I don't know that we need to say much more there on that.
No, that's
Discipline
good.
does bring forth righteousness.
Yeah. And it's so how does somebody though build up their, let's say, tolerance to discipline?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a good question. So what I tell my clients a lot of the times, and this is how we, work together if you come into my program, is we start very small. So I tell people oftentimes, if you haven't, and this we'll just get super practical. If you haven't exercised in a long time, if you haven't paid attention to what you're eating in a long time or anything like that,
Hmm.
do not try to do it all at one time. Do not try to
Hmm.
completely change your diet, completely start going to the gym 5 days a week, because you will last for about a week and that's
Yep.
about it, because
Yeah.
it's a complete upside down shift of your life. So what you need to do, and what I tell people most of the time for a first step, is drink 64 ounces of water per day. That's a pretty easy thing to hit. Most of us are walking around dehydrated unless you're paying attention to what you're drinking, and most of us are not.
Right.
So
Yeah.
start there, do that for a week to 2 weeks. Once you do that, okay, you're stacking up. You've got a win here in this column. Okay, now we're going to add one more thing. Now I want you to go on a 30-minute walk. You can take your family, you can take your wife, do that 3 times a week. Do that for 2 to 3 weeks. So now you're drinking water like you should be, you're staying hydrated, and you're starting to move your body a little bit. So do that for 2 to 3 weeks. Now we got those 2 wins. So we're starting to change that mentality. We've done these easy things, and we start stacking those wins. And as you stack those wins, you continue to add stuff on until you get to where you need to be.
Yeah. So with the 64 ounces of water, is that just to make you feel full or to give your body the water it actually needs inside the cells?
Yeah, it's to give your body the water that it actually needs.
Yeah.
So like I said, most of us are walking around dehydrated. Um,
Hmm.
my recommendation is 64 ounces to a gallon of water per day. And
Wow.
we start at that 64 because it's, you know, 8 ounce glasses and
Right.
it's pretty easy to hit.
Yeah, 8 times 8. You can do it once every hour or thereabouts, or spread it out over 90 minutes at a time.
Exactly.
Now, one of the things I think that rears its ugly head is that fear and self-doubt, and that they can actually be paralyzing. So the mind gets kind of paralyzed by the fear and doubt, and the body follows suit. Can you share some practical strategies for overcoming these obstacles through maybe some faith and some action?
Yeah. So praying about it obviously would be the number one. Remind yourself of who God says that you are, not the lies that you're believing from the
Hmm.
enemy. Would
Yeah.
be that would be number one. The other thing goes back to taking some sort of action. Action oftentimes cures anxiety. When we get anxious, it's usually because we're overthinking. It's usually because we're something that we could solve pretty quickly. We're just thinking too much about it. So if you get that feeling of anxiety, my first piece of advice to myself, because I get there sometimes too, and also other men, is like just move forward. Do something. It doesn't have to be
Hmm.
drastic. Go put up stuff in your living room. Go have a
Yeah.
glass of water. Do something that moves you a little bit. And then we go back to kind of those super small wins, the
Yeah.
drinking of 64 ounces of water per day. Just do that. That's
Yeah.
one small win you can do.
Yeah. Our flesh really needs baby steps.
Very much so.
It doesn't, it's just human nature that once we get set in our ways, and we want to change our ways, there needs to be a reset. And so one step at a time, and like you were talking about, action is indeed the antidote to despair. And in thinking back to your time in the corporate world, there was probably some times where you got into some despair. And what were those practical things that helped you change your mind to leave despair in the past?
Yeah. So there were times in the corporate world, and while I was there, I was oftentimes building other things. So
Hmm.
during my time in the corporate world, I had started a small handyman slash home repair business. So I was doing
Okay.
some of that on the side. Another thing that I was doing was learning. I was oftentimes, I spent a lot of time in the truck, in the vehicle. I had a lot of driving to do. So, rather than listening to music, I was listening to podcasts or audiobooks. And that's a good first step for, guys that
Hmm.
want to improve their life is, start reading some books, start listening to podcasts, start taking in information that's helpful for you. Another thing that I would love to hit on is when I first quit my job, and there's a little bit more story there, but I fell into a pretty good depression for probably 3-ish months. And looking back now, I think the reason for that was, I had spent the last 10 or 12 years working for someone else and having someone else tell me what to do, build my schedule. So jumping into that entrepreneurship of like, "Hey, it's up to you. It's up to you to build your schedule. It's up to you to figure out what you need to do." Like all
Yeah.
of that stuff was very heavy. And I spent a lot of time there. The action and the having godly brothers that I could call on was two helpful
Mm.
things that kind of pulled me out of that.
Right. Yeah, certainly that community of fellowship that we can have around us. And certainly there probably comes a time where we have to find, just like we have that reset because we don't no longer want to be set in our ways. We want a new way. It's almost like there sometimes needs to be a new community that we form around us. And now I wanted to do you want to delve into that just a little bit about finding the people that will run alongside you instead of hold you back?
Yes, I would love to. When I was learning, when I started kind of on my self-improvement journey, I kept hearing this phrase, "You are the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with."
Hmm.
And if you've done any kind of growth, personal growth, personal development, I'm sure you've heard that phrase. And I loved that phrase. And my immediate thought every time I heard it was, okay, how in the world do I find those people? Because
Yeah.
I don't know where they are. And the biggest unlock for me was I actually joined a mastermind, and it's been probably 2 or 3 years ago. And that was my first kind of like, okay, I invested money to be in this group for myself to make me a better man, to make me a better
Hmm.
husband, to make me a better father. It was a godly brotherhood. And that was where I started to find these people.
Yeah.
So I had to put myself out there more or less and had to make an investment to get into the room where these men were.
Yeah. Yeah, just to actually get into the new company. Part of that is, I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking of my friend Dennis that we love getting together for lunch every 6 weeks or so. When you're meeting with other people who are also like higher thinkers, looking for more, looking to talk about ideas, there's that old saying that leaders are readers. Is this something that you talk with your clients about?
As far as reading,
Yeah.
it can be. We go into different things with as far as like the strength and nutrition piece. So the strength and nutrition
Hmm.
piece is, kind of the bottom line. Like this is where we start. And
Yeah.
oftentimes through, our communication and, the accountability that we share together and the, one-on-one coaching, we'll oftentimes get into other topics. We've talked about
Right.
marriage, we've talked about raising kids, so we've talked about growing and learning and reading.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely can be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And having something to talk about. If we want to change our ways, we can't keep doing things the way that we've always done, and we can't keep relying on old mindsets and old ways of doing things. The very fact that we want to change our ways means the way we've been doing things is not working for us, and it's not giving us the fruit that we want. And so, one of these things, I know that you believe this to be true, is that leadership begins with self leadership. Can you talk about how this principle applies to being a husband and a father?
Yes, absolutely. So we think about let's think about it. All of us have probably had a boss that was not great at some point in time.
Hmm.
And somebody that just barked orders instead of walk the walk. So when it comes to your family, when it comes to leading your wife and leading your children, You can't expect them to do things that you aren't willing to do yourself. So
Hmm.
it is up to you as the leader to forge the way, to forge the path, and give them something to follow. If
Yeah.
you're not leading, then how are they supposed to follow? And you can't lead until you start taking some responsibility and
Yeah.
taking some ownership for yourself, because that's where it starts.
Right. And I suppose if we just amp that up a little bit outside of the home, is there a way that maybe you see that fitness and nutrition contribute to even better leadership outside the home in the community?
Yes. So being fit, paying attention to your diet, paying attention to your nutrition gives
Hmm.
you a certain type of presence. So when I'm out and about in the community, if I see a guy that is fit, a guy that has good muscle tone, a guy that has good muscle mass, I automatically know that he is disciplined, he is
Hmm.
responsible, and that he has a hard work ethic. So
Yeah.
that's three things simply from one glance that I can find out about
Yes.
another man if he is in shape. And that automatically kind of draws other people in. And then you also have this air about you, and it's not arrogance, it's just the confidence in who that you are, in knowing that you're
Hmm.
capable, in knowing that you are disciplined, in taking care of
Yeah.
yourself. And that kind of air about you also draws people towards you. So that's kind of where I would leave that. Is it's the easiest way. By
Hmm.
one glance you can see that someone is disciplined, that they
Right.
work hard, and that they take responsibility for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you share some tips on how fathers can teach their children these healthy habits and set out a legacy of strength?
Yeah. So it comes even if you're not intentional about it. And I say that as, kids will do what we do, not what we say. My
Hmm.
oldest is 4 right now, and he knows more about protein and how important protein intake is than most grown men. And I say
Yeah.
that kind of chuckling because we do talk about it some. It's something that's such a part of my life that it just, just comes out, whether it's, family conversations or, supper or anything like that.
Yeah.
And, he's oftentimes, because I work from home, he's oftentimes asking me, he's like, Dad, where are you going? Dad, where are you going? Because he's 4. He wants to just hang out and play. And I said, hey, buddy, I've got to go to the gym. He's like, well, Daddy, why do you have to go to the gym? It's like, because, buddy, I need to be capable of protecting you and mommy and your baby brother, and I
Hmm.
need to be capable of providing for you guys, whatever that looks like in whatever capacity it is. So daddy has to go and get stronger and stay in shape and make sure that he can keep up with you guys, make sure he can protect you guys, and show you guys what it looks like to be a good steward of the body that God gave you.
Yeah. So thinking back to yourself of 8 to 10 years ago and to yourself now, compare and contrast, do you think that before you were in this mode that you're in now, you were maybe a little more easily provoked, or things might have upset you a little bit more than they do now?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think it's just more, growth in my relationship with Christ,
Hmm. Yeah.
growth in myself, just maturity in an aspect.
Right.
A lot of the times experiencing life can help you
Yeah.
grow.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an old saying, again from one of the Stoics, Epictetus. He said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. And so, as we strengthen ourselves, as we discipline ourselves, these activities actually have an enormous amount of fruit in like our whole entire being. Could you share maybe a transformative story of a client who went from feeling maybe sidelined and has now stepped up as a leader in his home and community?
Yeah, of course. So I worked with a fella. He started with me back in November of this past year, so right around Thanksgiving. And he wasn't terribly overweight, but he had a little bit of weight to lose and
Mm.
wanted to get more in shape and feel better and all of that stuff. So he started working with me a week or two before Thanksgiving. He actually lost 2 pounds during the week
Wow.
of Thanksgiving, where the majority of Americans gain 5 to 7 pounds. Don't fact check me on that. I think it's close, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, so he lost 2 pounds during the week of Thanksgiving and also enjoyed the time, because my program is not like the super strict, insane thing. I want to build something
Right.
that's sustainable and
Yeah.
that you can carry on for the rest of your life. But we chatted about a week or 2 weeks ago, and he is a youth pastor. So he's
Okay.
got some kids of his own. They're like elementary school age, and he's a youth pastor as well. So he needs to have energy. He needs to feel good during his day.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and he was sharing with me about how he now does have energy to play with the kids when he is at his job. And the other cool thing that he shared with me was I forget how old his daughter was, 10 or 11, and they were playing, and he just picked her up and he lifted her up over his head. And she just said, "Daddy, this is why you're getting strong, so you can hold me." And it was just like, oh,
Uh,
yes, yes, this is why.
that's nice. That's a good spot to be. And I think that employers would have much better employees if they paid for their gym time.
Absolutely.
Like not only paid for the membership, but paid for that 90 minutes or that 60 minutes that their staff was in the gym. They would have a completely different workforce,
100% agree.
completely different mindset in the audience. What advice, because I know employers are going to take my piece of advice for that, but it would pay them back in spades for sure. But what advice do you have for men? They might feel overwhelmed by their responsibilities and maybe they don't know where to start reclaiming their strength.
Yes. So the feeling of overwhelm with your responsibilities, the what first comes to mind for me is remembering, and I have to do this often,
Yeah.
remembering that there is a God and you are not him. So as men, we have a shepherd, and it is our responsibility to take our burdens to our shepherd and lay them at his
Yeah.
feet. So that would be number one. The other thing, as far as being overwhelmed, what was the last part of your question, Michael? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, just of that they're overwhelmed by their responsibilities and they don't actually know how to start reclaiming their strength.
Yes. Okay. So as far as reclaiming your strength, the first thing that I would do is start doing something in some capacity that is good for you. A lot of the times, we talked about this earlier in the show, is we feel like we have to sacrifice all the time. And oftentimes, part of being a man, being the leader, it is your job to sacrifice. But we
Hmm.
take that too far oftentimes, and we never, again, we go back to filling your cup up. We never do something that fills our cup up.
Yeah.
So whether there's a hobby that you enjoy doing that you haven't done in ages, because you feel like you don't have time, whether it's doing something for your health, which is extremely important, guys, that factors into everything later on in age, and regardless of how old you are now or how you feel now, if you don't
Hmm.
do something now, it's not going to get any better when you're older. It's going to get worse. But doing something for you, doing something that you
Yeah.
enjoy, and I'm not saying go spend a day or 2 days away from your family every week. I'm
Right.
just saying take a little bit of time, maybe it's 20 minutes, and do something that you enjoy doing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And understanding this comes back to the mask in the plane of making sure that you're oxygenated so that you can help oxygenate other people with their mask. And so, looking ahead for you and your family, your vision, what's your vision for the impact of McManus Strength and Nutrition on, well, I guess, Christian and non Christian men alike and their families in the coming years?
Yeah, so I want to impact as many men as I can, as many men as God would
Uh-huh.
allow me to do. I want to see men feel good about themselves again. I want to see
Yeah.
them be proud to be men and be
Uh-huh.
proud of the masculinity that God has given them, because
Yeah.
it's a gift and it belongs here. And once they really I want to say get a feel for that, but once they get a feel for that and they start to step into that role, not only do they feel better
Yeah.
and they benefit and they start showing up better, but your family benefits from it so much.
Yeah.
Your family
Yeah.
benefits from your leadership so much. Your
Hmm.
wife, your kids, it just pours over into everything else.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if men are starting out, it has been said that our traumas and our pains from life they kind of rest. There's this, there's a spiritual and a physical side to everyone's life. It's not just you're 78 years on earth and you're pushing up daisies after they bury you in the ground. There's a spiritual and a physical to everyone's life. And it has been said that on your C5 through 7 vertebrae, that's where the trauma and the pain and the regret like to hang out if you don't know how to get rid of that. And one of the things that physical activity does is it makes your body inhospitable for all the heavy D's, the despair, the disappointment, the disillusionment, all those D words. That the physical act of strength training And that commitment and discipline, that's one of the good D words. It pays off. And I remember one of the first times many years ago, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, of starting out at the Gym of the North. It's probably 6, I would say, yeah. Just trying to be truthful in what I'm saying and speak truth. But being able to see some of these other guys that obviously had been going there for a while or to other gyms and looking at what they were doing and thinking, okay, I can get there. If I can discipline myself in word, thought, and deed and food, and I can get there. And when, both of us would agree, and many listening would agree that when you hit those personal bests that 2 or 3 years ago you could never even have visualized yourself or thought about yourself making those personal records. Just in the closing minutes, maybe you want to talk about that success and what it does and why men need to take that first step to actually get where they want to be in 2 or 3 years from now.
Yeah. So when you were talking about that, Michael, the first thing that came to my mind was men don't win enough.
Mm.
We're at a period in our culture where I feel like it's shifting some, which is good, but men have been demonized for a long time.
Mhm.
Masculinity has been demonized for a long time, and we were made to conquer. That's how God made us. He put Adam in
Yeah.
the garden, and he said, "This is yours to take
Right.
care of, to grow." I mean, that's
Yes.
that's that's what we're made to do, and we get so caught up in the day to day of just kind of the normal routine, which is fine. Like it's part of life. We have to build routines. We have to have those normal things with our families and everything. But adding something in that allows you to quote unquote, like we said before, go to war in some kind of physical
Hmm.
aspect with your body, with yourself, with those demons that are fighting each other in the back of your mind, that allows you to go to war with those things and to conquer them. Holy cow. Imagine how much better you'd show up for life if you had some
Yes.
wins.
That's right. And this is kind of off topic, but it's related to men, all the men folk out there about facial hair and beards. My wife and I have certainly had enough conversations about the beard. Ivan the Terrible, who was only terrible to his adversaries, not to the people that he ruled. Ivan the Terrible said, "Shaving the beard is a sin the blood of all the martyrs will not wash away. It would mean blemishing the image of man as God created him." So, gentlemen, just some encouragement. If you don't want to grow a beard, I get it. But just some encouragement to the men listening that your sacrifice is worth it, and keep going, keep pursuing excellence. And I just want to encourage our listeners that if you've been inspired by Sean's message and want to learn more about working with him, you can connect with Sean through his social media platforms. He mentioned the Instagrams. We also know that you can visit Sean McManus on X at, so once you do the x.com and the slash, you want to put in the Sean McManus, and that'll take you there. He's at the Sean McManus on X. Send him a DM, and he'll be sure to get back to you with some more information. So, and then of course, don't forget to follow Sean for daily content and helpful tips to help you stay on track with your fitness and your faith mindset journey. Sean, sincere thanks for you joining me today on the 5 a.m. podcast.
Michael, it's been such a blessing to have this conversation, man. I hope we inspired some guys and just
Absolutely.
help them move forward and taking the next step in their growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Loved having you here. Loved the conversation and talking with you about these very important things for men that it's personal responsibility, but it benefits. When men rise above, it benefits everyone around them. And so I want to thank our viewers for joining, for listening. We appreciate you listening in on this conversation. Absolutely share this with some friends. If you've got some names of guys rolling around of thinking you need to pester somebody, won't say any names, Mark, but who knows who's out there. And if you got a name rolling around in your head, absolutely share this. Connect them with 5am podcast and with Sean McManus. It will pay dividends. These kinds of things that we suffer or that we choose to do to change our ways, they pay dividends in this life and the life to come. So Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you for those that left 5-star reviews on your favorite podcast player. I'm going to keep saying that because we keep getting 5-star reviews. And so thank you for listening. We appreciate that. You have not because you ask not. And so we got to say thanks and have some gratitude for you listening, for you participating with us. Definitely leave some comments, and don't forget buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast. We would appreciate you participating in the work that we do here at 5am podcast. Like I said, drop something in the comments about your experience. Head over to Sean's X, drop some comments there, and we appreciate all your support. Until next time, make sure to seize your day, help others do the same, and don't forget to get up and enjoy those sunrises and stick around for the sunsets. I'm Michael Clausen.